You go to the Kashi Vishwanath temple, it's a Jyotirlinga of Shiva. The Jyotirlinga, above the Jyotirlinga stands a mosque.
Mosque, yes.
And you walk around and do a parikrama of the temple, you will see that that structure has been erected on top of a temple. The temple is seen below it. Now, as per the tenets of of Islam, you cannot build your place of prayer or ibadah over the structure of another person's faith.
Right.
It forbids it. But how is that happening? How has that been allowed? So, in the sense of equanimity, in the sense of brotherhood, in the sense of secularism, has the Muslim community ever told the Hindu community, what has happened with you is wrong?
Right.
Please build the temple back there, and we would like to respect the Jyotirlinga. Have they ever said it? Why?
Good evening, namaste, and welcome to Chitti Media. My name is Sharan Sethi, your host. In today's current affairs show, we are joined by an eminent media personality. You would have all seen him on television. He was formerly with Times Now, and currently he's a senior anchor at CNN News 18. Joining us today is Mr. Anand Narsimhan. Anandji, thank you so much. It's an honor and a privilege to have you here. Namaste. And please tell me this, are you joining us from Mumbai or Delhi?
Well, namaste, and I'm actually joining you from Delhi. I'm based in Noida now, and our studios are in Noida. I used to work out of Mumbai some time ago, but it's been about 4 years since Noida is my home. So, and our operations at CNN News 18 are here.
Right. Well, good to hear from you, and I'm really looking forward to this show. Now, you are an anchor of a program called The Right Stand on CNN News 18. Now, it's a very interesting terminology that you've used, right? Now, why and how was this show actually conceptualized?
Well, I made the transition from Times Now to CNN News 18, and with the aspect of trying to do something different, trying to do, use the platform to project what was a certain perspective about Bharat, about India, and the way to look at things. And we were to say that we were looking at something which would be thinking right. When you say thinking right, not just center right in terms of ideology, where you would say that no, the real meaning of approaching certain subjects has to be from a perspective where there is benefit for everybody. Nobody's growth should be grudged, and there should also be a certain level of pride in our culture, pride in our heritage, pride in our faith, our belief, but more importantly, realize that the constitution is to try and augment our civilizational and cultural ethos, and not vice versa.
Right.
So that was the thought process, and from where we came, and we said, so let us take the right stand in matters which pertain to the country. It will be aligned to the country, and the right stand will be the larger interest and the greater interest of Bharat. So there were certain things which we consciously did. We tried to call our country as Bharat, refer to it more from a people's perspective, where the nation as an entity supersedes everything else. And national ethos, what we stand for as a nation, our cultural roots, our civilizational roots, is something that we need to be proud of. So try and talk about that more actively in a very engaging, informative manner. Rise above just the rhetoric, use a lot of fact to base your arguments, and make very rational suggestions to a lot of emotive issues.
Anandji, in your show, I've watched a lot of your shows, and one particular show that came across to my interest was when you were addressing the issue of mob lynchings, or rather you were conducting a debate on it, and a very prominent Muslim leader from Hyderabad was saying that, under Modi's new India, there is a lot of mob lynching, and some sort of a religious supremacist majority in India is trying to demonize, is trying to sort of brutalize the minorities. But even 7 to 8 years after the Modi government has come into power, the narratives of, say, minorities in danger is still going on. Do you actually think or believe that Indian voters today are cognizant of this particular narrative as an electoral one?
It's a political narrative. The idea is to question that political narrative with facts. Now, this leader that you spoke about was in a state where he does not operate. He was there to try and stir the pot there. The only angle for paradropping in that area is to try and further communal passions. Somebody who's talking about inclusion and questioning the current disposition, his own party and entity stands for the cause of only one section of Indian society.
Right.
His party itself represents only the cause of Muslims, who I personally believe are the second largest majority in our country. They are not a minority.
Right.
The word minority itself has been debased to equate it with Muslims. But and frankly, our constitution needs to now quantify what is minority in our country. 2%, 3%, 4% of our population, that should be minority. Muslims in our country account for anywhere upwards of 18% of our population. 30 crores out of 135 crores is not a minority. It's the second largest majority in our country. So, and it's time that those who want to play sectarian politics or communal politics and want to define our people based on their religion or faith, personal faith, then they start admiring and admitting and treating. And the moment this realization dawns with everybody, there will be a shift also. There will be a change in the way people look at it. Minorities are Parsis, who are just 50,000 in number. Minorities are Sikhs. World over, outside of India, it's only in Canada that you have so many Sikhs. Minorities in our country are Jains. Minority in our country are Buddhists. Minority in our country, although many would question that too now, but so far, based on census data, are Christians, Baha'i. There are so many others who are actual minorities. So welfare of those minorities nowhere else in the world, in India only. Afghan Sikhs, where do they want to come to? India. Pakistani Sikhs, where do they want to come to? India. Bangladeshi Sikhs, where do they want to come to? India. Parsis, their own Iran Shah and the sacred fire was preserved for 1,000 years. And where does it glow, shine bright? In Udwada, in Gujarat, which is there in India. So Zoroastrianism finds its roots and is surviving in India. Jews are a minority in our country, but they're very happy in India. So Ahmadis are not even recognized as Muslims, but where are they? In India. So this entire narrative of minorities are in danger is a political narrative. So we called that out. What he also said is that Muslims and Dalits are being lynched. Now, here is again a lexicon where how the narrative is said. The othering of Hindus by breaking them into castes and then making it a casteist narrative.
Yes.
Oh, Brahmins have done it and they've destroyed Hinduism. It's Brahminism. Sorry, it's not Brahminism, it's elitism. And elitism is prevalent, it's wrong, but it's prevalent in every faith, in every society. So why is it that Sunnis don't consider Shias as Muslims? Why are Shias not allowed in Sunni mosques? Why is it that Ahmadis are not considered? It's all elitism. No, it's all again casteism and sectarianism. And there is elitism that is practiced. What is this terminology called Dalit Christians? You are either Dalit, that means Dalits are Hindus. So you are either Hindu or you are Christians. What is Dalit Christian? So that's again casteism, elitism, which is seen. Syrian Christian Church will fight with the Jacobites. Catholics are fighting with the Protestants. The word secular was derived from that because the Catholics and the Protestants were like loggerheads, and the king did not know which church to follow. They said, okay, we'll use secular. So all of these things are misnomers and deliberate deviation. What I called out was, yes, lynchings are happening in our country and lynchings are wrong. But who is actually lynching Hindus? When I say Hindus, and especially lower caste Hindus or Dalits, it's Muslims. Muslims are lynching the Dalits. Muslims are beating Dalits. Muslims are forcing Dalits out of their localities. Muslims are doing the same thing. So I called out based on facts, and he was talking about Uttar Pradesh. So I called out the facts from Uttar Pradesh, where from Deganga in West Bengal, and after that I said he said from 2014 onwards. So they said, okay, let's start from July 2014 onwards, and from Bilgam in July 2014, and all the way data. I have data till 2019, July 2019. Multiple instances, at least 18 instances in Uttar Pradesh itself, where it is Muslim communities atrocities on the Hindu community, especially Dalits. That's what's happened. So
Right.
I say, if the lynchings are happening, then go ahead and apologize to all the Dalits on behalf of the Muslim community, since you tend to claim to be leader from that community. And we called that out, and we said, listen, yeah, it's time. You stop peddling narratives. Lynching is a crime.
Right.
Let's start looking at crime as a crime rather than giving it color. It's very convenient, when they say, and this is also a fallacy in the journalistic lexicon, where when a Hindu commits a crime, it said Hindu boy attacks a Muslim girl,
Yeah.
or that's how it is headlined. Okay, but the moment it happens the other way, they drop the Muslim connotation, say, oh, you can't say Muslim, say other community, fight between communities. Okay, and they will say, Dalit ko mara, Dalit ko, kisne mara? The moment it is a Muslim who hits, then they will not talk about it. The moment there is a caste line for them to toe, they will try and highlight it. So that is something we asked the same leader that you were talking. You remember Pehlu Khan in Alwar, but what happened recently in Alwar, where again a Dalit was lynched by Muslims? What is happening in Malpura and Tonk in Rajasthan, where Hindus are and Dalits largely and Jains are being forced out of their locality? 200 of them are saying in 2 wards that we are going to leave this place because there is increasing exclusion being practiced by Muslim community there. Nurpur in Uttar Pradesh, the same thing happened. In Kairana also, the same thing was claimed. The late Hukum Singh had made a huge thing, huge issue out of it, and he raised it in written to the Prime Minister and the Chief Minister also. So these are all realities in our society. And those who are trying to peddle false narratives still continue to do it, but you have facts to back you. As long as you have the facts, you can back and you can break any kind of propaganda or false narratives. It's just that people don't want or don't have access to the facts. So our job is to put the facts and say, have a look at this, and then you decide.
Right. Thank you. Very, very interesting points. In fact, I had a couple of follow-ups, but I think you've covered even those. And you're very right in saying this, because when I went through journalism school, we were taught the exact same thing. It's a process of indoctrination where you cannot name a certain community, especially, if they're quote unquote minorities, and you become some sort of a untouchable in journalism. So these challenges do exist. In that sense, how do you break this barrier where crime reporting is becoming an issue? In that sense, you do not get the statistics to call out people for who they are and which community they're coming from. How did this change come about in journalism, Anandji?
Well, it is not a change. It is something that has been fed to us even in our textbooks. Where those who were charged with teaching us history tried to paint Mahmud of Ghazni only as an invader who was only interested in loot and plunder, and he was a greedy man. That is why he repeatedly came and defiled the Somnath temple, because he was a greedy man.
Right.
And you want me to believe this? We were believing it. Okay, there are people who say that, who never come out and say that the words socialist and secular were surreptitiously and unconstitutionally forcefully inserted in during the time of emergency, at a time when democracy was in jail by Indira Gandhi. It is an act of the Congress party and its leader. So this is never taught to us. Our original constitution, the founding fathers, including Baba Sahib Ambedkar and everybody else, said India is inherently a nation that practices Sarvadharm Sambhav. So we don't need the word socialist and secular in our constitution, in our preamble. We are a sovereign democratic Republic of India. That's what we are, and that covers it all. So if our founding fathers rejected it, those who claim to be Ambedkarites today say the constitution enshrines the word socialist and secular, but they forget that Baba Sahib Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar said, no, we don't need these words. So where was this taught to us? So they tried to brainwash us or even try and rationalize and balance it out. You tell me, in our country, is there any other religious structure other than temples which has another religious structure coming out of his backside?
Right.
This is you go to the Kashi Vishwanath temple, it's a Jyotirlinga of Shiva. The Jyotirlinga, above the Jyotirlinga stands a mosque.
Mosque, yes.
And you walk around and do a parikrama of the temple, you will see that that structure has been erected on top of a temple. The temple is seen below it. Now, as per the tenets of the of Islam, you cannot build your place of prayer or ibadah over the structure of another person's faith.
Right.
It forbids it. But how is that happening? How has that been allowed? So, in the sense of equanimity, in the sense of brotherhood, in the sense of secularism, has the Muslim community ever told the Hindu community, what has happened with you is wrong?
Right.
Please build the temple back there, and we would like to respect the Jyotirlinga. Have they ever said it? Why? So why is it that secularism or equanimity or Sarvadharm Sambhav is only one person's job, is it?
Absolutely. Now, if I may ask a supplementary question, and you bring up some very pertinent points, Anandji, there has been a cabal that is trying, whether it's some parts of the Indian media or recently we had this dismantling global Hindutva conference by some of the Western academics who are trying to sort of otherize the DBA communities, is what they call Dalit, Bahujan and Adivasis. Now, what they are essentially trying to say is that the entirety of these communities are against Prime Minister Modi and the BJP and essentially are against Hindus. Now, how has does this actually reflect in reality? Because most of this community is actually with the BJP in numbers when it comes to elections.
See, political choice is an individual's choice. I am not taking sides for any particular party, nor do I hold the brief for anybody. The idea is who's got a plan for the country. If you have a better plan for the country tomorrow compared to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, I will evaluate you there on basis that plan, that vision for the country. My love is for my country.
Right.
And if I have another person who loves the country equally and is trying to do his or her bit for the country, I respect them, welcome aboard. As far as this lot is concerned, they are ideologically challenged. And there is an ideological compulsion. These are hard leftists, and they are also backed by those who have an agenda of converting the Indian civilization, defeating the Indian civilization. How do you defeat a civilization? You break the civilization.
Right.
You try and create fissures so that you dissect it. Why is there a huge conversion racket going on with the Adivasis? Who's running this conversion racket? Christian missionaries are running it, and also there is money coming in as far as the Islamic groups are coming. It's all about dominance. It's all about using religion for dominance. And this is a centuries-old crusade which is going on.
Right.
The only civilization among the old civilizations which is still in its neo form surviving, with some of its roots tied to the old, is the Indic civilization. So how do you destroy the Indic civilization? You divide those who follow any form of the Indic civilization.
Mm-hmm.
So the Brits were castists. Which society is not casteist? Are you trying to say Muslims are not casteist? Of course they are. Are you trying to say Christians are not casteist? Of course they are. So casteism is something which I said it stems out of elitism. And elitism is a mindset issue. Elitism is a societal ill. So you can't just say only one particular segment in society or only one particular set of people are elitist or casteist. No, sir. Everybody is. And it's a universal problem. But for them, the narrative is that they want to see how do I break Modi? How do I beat Modi? Because there is no option. So then they would say, let's try and call this Hindutva brand and brigade and try and blame the RSS and let's demonize them. Look, my point is, What ideology are you following? That of an authoritarian lord who, just like inspired by Mao, are willing to run roughshod over everybody. What have they done in Xinjiang? What have they done with Buddhists in Tibet? What have they done with Mongols in Inner Mongolia? What have they done with the Manchus in Manchuria?
Yes.
Nobody is saying anything about it. And you are continuing to toe that line. And you claim to be a historian. So their sense of history, their purpose itself is distorted. But fact is that they are coming from their end. And they are coming with a particular narrative and they're trying to push a particular narrative. It's a fight of narratives. It's a fight of fact versus fact. So the more people know, the more people will question. And they were run roughshod. They were taken down on that platform itself. They were taken down, and you saw how the world turned around and started questioning them, and they were put in their place. So once you turn around and start questioning, you have to have belief. The problem is that we lost belief because we stopped reading. We stopped learning about our own culture. We stopped taking pride in our own culture and in our own roots. And we started falling to narratives which are being pushed and peddled over 300 years. It's not a recent phenomenon. But post independence, it's become an active thing because the academia was taken over by those people who wanted to break the very idea of India and this Indic civilization. So you have what do? You try and weaken the roots, you delink them from the Indic roots, society from the Indic roots, and then you say it's my narrative. So that's where the fight is. And I think more people read, more people talk. You put the facts, and people will then make the right judgment, take the right stand.
Right. And that is how we can be a catalyst for change, at least in journalism. Excellent points. And I know that you're short on time, so I'm going to ask you my last question. Like you rightly pointed out, we are facing a civilizational threat, whether it's the Chinese expansionism or, say, the Pakistan-sponsored terrorism, or even what's happening with radical Islam emanating out of Afghanistan. We are going back to the medieval era, like you said. Do you think India is prepared enough to take on this huge battle ahead?
Well, this battle has been, like I said, has been raging on for centuries. It's a battle of dominance. Islam will continue to push. It's a neo religion. They have to spread. The spread of a particular religion is done at the death of another. So, was Christianity very pure or very clean? What do you think about 6 lakh women being hung punk posts all across Europe? Why was it done? Because they tried to subvert and kill pagan religions. Why did they kill the pagans and brand them as witches? So Christianity also has a very bloody history, and that continues. So Christian missionaries are still running their conversion racket, and money is being funneled into the country, into nations where they feel that they still have not been enlightened. So this fight is a perennial fight. How do you fight this? Not by telling them that what they are doing is wrong, but then doing the right things as far as our own culture, our own civilization, and who we are as a people. See, in our country, there was no concept of Hinduism till about the 16th century. 1526-28 is when the British branded the entire group of people who were neither Muslim nor Sikh nor Christians as Hindus.
Right.
So we all follow different paths. See, our philosophy, what is our philosophy? Our philosophy is whatever path you follow, ultimately your goal is the same. So it's like rain that falls from the sky onto the mountain, but eventually enters the Sagara. Whatever route it takes, it reaches the ocean. So that is how philosophically that's the thought. So there was Shaivism, there were Shakyas, there were Vaishnavas, there were Jains, there were Buddhists, there were different philosophies of thought which came through. How about Sikhism? Sikhism evolved because you wanted to revive the Kshatriya race. So every Hindu, the eldest child of every Hindu family became a warrior.
Right.
So irrespective of which family you came from, you were all treated as equal because, and that's why they grew their beard, they wore a turban because then they would all look alike. They dressed the same manner. So that's what the Gurus advocated. And it was these Sikhs that pushed back the marauders in the north. So this is our history. So the only way to fight is to counter it and to get a deeper engagement. I am a very strong advocate that our curriculum, our method of instruction, whatever be the language, should have the instruction of the Bhagavad Gita, uncorrupted by colonial language, decolonized in the true spiritual thought that one book of 720 verses, if it is taught to children between the age of 3 and 12, they will know exactly who they are, what they need to believe in, and how they should lead their life. That is the cultural enrichment that we need to do. If we are culturally strong, our foundations are strong, society is strong, nothing else is going to corrupt it.
Absolutely. These are golden words coming from you. Thank you so much, Anandji, for joining us today. And you're actually right about this, because we need to decolonize ourselves, our literature, and there is a long way to go, because whatever we do and see and read is from a very European colonial experience, and that is what our students are being taught today as well. And thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you can join us for future conversations as well. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very humbled and I look forward to more engagements. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anandji. Namaste. Have a good day.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.